Welcome to In the Garden. I'm your host, Joyce Hochbrunn, McLeod County Master Gardener. Today we're going to talk about starting seeds indoors and a little bit about winter sowing too. So we'll get started. First thing you need, of course, is your seeds, depending on what it is you want to start. January, February is a great time to peruse all the seed catalogs that come through to your house. Helps the winter pass a little bit faster. So once you've got your seeds, whether you buy them locally at the stores or the garden centers, or you order some specialty ones online, then you need to plan about when you're going to plant them. Now, if you look at the seed packets, they will almost all have information about seed starting. For example, these golden star peppers says sowing outdoors not recommended because we have a very short growing season here. So you need to start those 8 to 10 weeks before you want to put them outside. Now our last frost date is May 15th in this area of the state. So you don't want to put them out before that, and some years you might have to wait longer than that. So that 8 to 10 weeks gives you a little window space there. So you get your calendar out and you count backwards. Find where it is and where to start them. So let's do that. Let's go from, we'll use May 15th. Okay, right here. So we're going to go backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This last Monday would have been 9 weeks. So somewhere in here, somewhere between about the 13th, the 6th and the 20th or so, you want to be starting your pepper seeds. Okay? So that's kind of how you just look at your last frost date, count backwards from there. Keep in mind the warm season crops. You may not be, just because the calendar says it's May 15th, we can still get some pretty chilly temps in May, and you want to make sure the soil is warm for those warm season crops. But how do you start them, and what do you need? Well, you need a container, something to put them in. Okay? I like to use these expandable pellets. You don't have to. You can also use something like this. This one happened to come already with soil already conveniently in them. Of course, you pay for that convenience. You can also buy your own soil. And talk about the soil to use. This is a special seed starting mix. The reason for using that is it's sterile, so you have less chance of a fungal disease called damping off hitting your seedlings. If you've ever tried starting and they all kind of just keeled over on you, and the stems just look like they went, whoop, that's damping off. It's kind of sad when you see that. So a sterile potting mix or soilless mix can help with that. The other thing is putting your seedlings, or before they germinate, putting them on a heat mat or some warm space. It might be on top of your refrigerator if you have the space for that. That's warm. It might be a heated floor, as long as you don't crank it up to 85 or so, because you might cook the seeds. Otherwise, you can pick up seed mats, heating mats. You just plug into an outlet, you put them down, put them on something heat resistant. I probably wouldn't want to do it on my wooden table here. And they're preset for basically the temperatures, for that 75 degree temperature that most things like for germination. Okay? Now these run, anywhere, I was looking last night just to double check, depending on how much you want to spend, $15 to $25 for one this size. So you may have to look around a little bit to find the ones for $15, but I did some checking at a couple places the other day. The ones I saw were $25. You can get them in different sizes. I have a larger one that's about double this size, that I have a big tray that it goes on because I start a lot of daylily seedlings, and I didn't want to only have so many outlets, and it's easier just to plug in one or maybe two if I need the spare and go with that. But that's a very handy tool. It's not an essential, but it certainly helps with germination. Okay, so we've got that. And we've looked at this one has pellets. And all you do is add water, kind of a self-contained greenhouse here. Add water, wait for them till they stop taking up water. They're nice and puffed up. These are bigger ones, kind of specially designed more for tomatoes because of the size, and tomatoes grow very quickly once they germinate. So let them get puffed up. And these are just some smaller ones that I started some peppers in. As you can see, they're much, much smaller, even puffed up. But I'll put these downstairs under my lights for a couple of weeks until we get true leaves on them. Now, because I was starting with some older seed, I put 2 to a pellet, and I'll just snip off one. Don't pull them, that can damage the seedling roots of the other one. So I just take a little snips and just snip it off at soil level and leave just one once they've germinated. Okay, if not, you're going to do this route. That works too. You have to make sure this is nice and moist. I would suggest sitting it in side of another tray. This one might not fit in this particular, oh, it will. Filling it up with water and letting it wick it up from the bottom so you have nice moist soil. And then it might not get the very top, so if your seeds are something like petunias that you sow on top of the soil basically and just kind of press them down, then you might have to spritz the top with a spray bottle too before you get it nice and moist before you plant. Okay, once you've got that done, and you can use any containers that you happen to have that will hold soil. If you don't have seed starting mix and you can't find it, look for the closest thing you can find to a sterile potting mix. And if it's not light enough, you may have to add a little bit of perlite, you know, the white stuff that looks like styrofoam. It's not styrofoam, by the way, it's expanded volcanic rock. And mix that in just to lighten it up a little bit. So also, besides this helping with damping off, starting them on a heat mat also helps. If they get cold, damping off is more likely to hit, because cold, wet soil is a good recipe for damping off disease. So if you can get a heat mat or a warm spot with some bottom heat, that will help. Then, okay, we've got this nice and moist, and this, by the way, will probably end up at our Hort Day as a door prize, so come to our Hort Day. But, you know, if you have to use regular potting mix, do that. Maybe lighten it up a little bit if you have to. You just don't have it on hand, you want to. Say you don't have this nice little humidity dome, and you can't find one. Get out the old chopsticks. You were probably wondering, why in the world does she have chopsticks laying there? And it doesn't have to be chopsticks. It could be some other stick that you find, dowels or whatever you happen to have around. And I would poke these in, probably one on each end and another one about in the middle, and here. And then for a humidity dome, good old dry cleaning bags. You know, you always get those back with your dry cleaning, and they will work. It's not the prettiest thing, and you may want to cut it off partway or halfway, but you would slide this in. It's also a little trickier to do when you've got this, but it can be done. Get enough here, and then your chopsticks tucked into the corners. I'm not going to poke a hole in here since this is going to go as a door prize, and don't want to be leaking soil all over, but you get the idea. I'd probably, there we go, put the fatter end up. And you'd have another one here and on the ends, which would hold this up, giving you a humidity dome. You can loosely close the end. Want to keep an eye on it for condensation. A little condensation is fine, but if it gets where it's dripping back into the trays, keeping them soggy, you might want to open up the end a little bigger, or maybe just poke a hole or two in the top to let some of that out. marking them. Don't think you're going to remember what you planted where. So unless you're really, really good at seedling identification, I would suggest marking them. Now, I just use old window blinds. I know everybody's always looking for, oh, what do you write on your tags with? How do you keep the sun from fading it? Sharpie will fade the fastest. Don't even bother with it because it will be gone. The paint pens will last a while. They're not too bad if you want to invest in a paint pen. But I'm going, people, just get the lead pencil out. An old pencil. That's all it takes. Write on it, cut it to the size you need, poke it in there. And when you're doing something like this, if you're doing 4 of one kind of pepper or whatever, you can just do 1 for the row. That's fine. You will need to, and I purposely, when I was looking, I picked up one with bigger cells. You can get one with 72 cells in it. I like bigger because you don't have to pop them out and repot them quite as quickly as you might otherwise. The other given thing about these is I can just, once they germinate, I just take them out of here, get them downstairs under my lights, check them every day, move them down, wait for the late germinators to pop up, and I don't have these getting leggy while I'm waiting. So I would say once most of them, or at least 3/4 of them have germinated, get it under lights if you can. And yes, if you want to grow peppers, eggplant, or tomatoes, you're going to need lights. A windowsill just isn't going to cut it, not in Minnesota. Maybe some places, but in case you've noticed, we haven't seen a lot of sun recently, or for the last several months. So lights are going to be helpful. They don't have to be grow lights necessarily. Fluorescent lights or shop lights type things. I'm switching over, and I'll show you in a little while. And I have noticed quite a difference in my plants that are grown under the LEDs as opposed to the fluorescents, because the fluorescents will lose the amount of light they give off as they age. So even though they're still lit and working, the intensity of the light is not quite as strong as it was when they were new. Watering your seedlings. I like, whether it's a tray like this or these, or once I transplant, I like to bottom water. I just put the water in one of these trays, and there are all kinds of different trays like this. Occasionally you can even get, nurseries might, if you ask, might give you some of their old ones, because eventually they get kind of wonky wobbly. If you want to invest in a little sturdier tray, they're out there. I've had this one for probably 10 years, and I like these because I'm carrying stuff up and down the stairs from my basement to the window, and down, from the starting mats downstairs to the lights. And going up and down steps with a wobbly tray is not my idea of fun, so I did invest in some sturdier ones. And like I said, this one, and I have several of them, is probably about 10 years old and still going strong. And if you want bigger seed starting capabilities, this is an even bigger humidity dome and a bigger seed starting tray. And I use this one especially for my daylilies, because I'm doing about 140 or 150 at, probably about 160 in here, and probably get about 144, 145 that germinate. And this is a fairly heavy duty tray. Again, I've had this one for probably close to 10 years. Getting a little much condensation here, so it's got these cute little things that I can open up on the top, these little vents to let out more moisture. This one does also. It doesn't fit quite as securely. Fits better on this type of tray. This is called a 1020, I believe. But you do have to watch, because things will dry out a little faster just because it doesn't fit down quite as snugly. So keep an eye on it. If you get one like this that has no vents, when you take it apart and do it, you just instead of setting it on square, set it on kind of kitty-wampus. And you can see this is set up with, maybe see that a little better. Just turn it maybe like this, you know, so you've got a little air circulation, got a little venting going on. We're going to talk a little bit about winter sowing. I know I've talked briefly about it before, and we've got the milk jug. You can use other containers too. The main thing, you want something that will hold minimum of 3 inches of soil. Let's see if I can get this straight. This one is almost 4, which is even better. Notice I cut just at the base of the handle, left it attached. And I'm going to fill this, and here you don't need seed starting mix. Just the seed starting mix will dry out too quickly. Okay, so here you want to just use a good, decent potting soil. Maybe not the very cheapest stuff that feels like clumps of wet mud, but a decent one, a fairly light one. Got plenty of drainage holes in here. Okay, and I have 2 of these currently sitting outside in a snowbank, so that I started a couple prairie plants in that require a long chill period. I've got meadow blazing star and prairie smoke started. We'll see how that goes. You can dump the whole packet in if you want. I don't. I put maybe 8 to 10 seeds in one. I don't like the hunk of seedling method, trying to pull them apart, but if you want to do that, that's fine. You can do that. So I kind of scatter them around in there, and we'll see what I get come spring. I was going to bring one of them in to show you, but decided I really didn't want to walk out in the rain through the snowdrift to get to them, so sorry about that. And these I started in January, mid-January, because they require a minimum of 60 days cold stratification. Okay, so when you do this, again, you want to fill this up high as you can with your potting soil. Have it nice and moist, not soggy. You may want to water it well and then set them aside and let them drain for a few hours. Okay, when they're moist but not soggy, you're going to plant your seeds at whatever the planting depth is. Some might be surface sowing, some might be deeper. Lots of times people will write on the jug with magic marker. By the time you're ready to plant them, that will be gone. Don't even bother. Again, just a bigger one, right on the front and the back. Pop it inside before you tape it up. And you can put it close to the front if you want. Maybe you'll see it, but whatever. At least you'll know what it is once you open it up. And that will keep you from playing the what did I plant in this one game. Once you get them in there, close it up. Get out the duct tape. It's not pretty, but it works. And you're simply going to tape around here to hold it shut. I usually put a couple short ones here and here because when I try to get the whole thing on, I end up with a tangled mess. And after I get it held in place, then I'll go around once more. Leave the cap off. Throw the cap away. You don't need the cap. You don't want the cap. You want rain, snow, whatever to be getting in here. Now I'm going to probably use this one in a week or so and do what I call spring sowing. Well, hopefully it will be spring. We can hope, right? And I'm going to do something like this Culver's root, which is another native plant, but it doesn't need that long chill period. So I'll probably put it in a week or two and hope that we have more spring-like weather instead of that. It won't hurt it if we don't, but And then another week, couple weeks, I might do another one and do some calendula in it because I really like calendula. And by the time I get my daylilies and my tomatoes and my peppers and my eggplant and my parsley, my room under the lights is gone. So anything else I do pretty much has to be outside. So there's that. You can't just leave them closed up. Kind of, you get the eyeball in there and peer in once things start warming up. And when you see them start to germinate, then you can peel the tape off or cut it through it again and just leave this a little bit looser. And if you get some really warm days, you might want to put a stick in there again. top stick or whatever, just to hold it up and hold it open a little. Still gives it some wind protection, but you've got enough air circulation, you aren't going to cook your baby plants. And that can happen if you forget and you get one of those really warm spring days, where it suddenly jumps up to 80 and you have this closed up tight and it's like, so sad. Okay, I think we're gonna take a little jaunt downstairs and see my light setup. It's nothing fancy, so be prepared. Down here, this is my lovely light setup. And I've transitioned to mostly LEDs. I have a few fluorescents left yet, this one, that one over there, and I think one more over there. And as they go, so goes it. I have them on chains hung from the ceiling, so I can raise and lower this. I'm gonna pop these under the lights in my little bitty nursery one over here. It's great for growing my petunias and for getting my seedlings to have true leaves. So we're going to pop these guys down in here under the lights so you can see some of the babies. These are mostly, I've already started my habanero peppers and my jalapenos and my eggplant, because they tend to take a little bit longer. And I've got a few dichondra in here yet that were slow starters and aren't potted up yet. Over here I have my petunias growing. They're almost ready for a first pinch, not quite, maybe another week. And I pinch them pretty severely as they start growing. That keeps them bushier. And my goal is to keep them from doing too much blooming before I'm ready to put them out. Because once they start blooming, they're putting their energy into that instead of root growth. So I want to keep that root growth ready to go and into the ground when I put them in. But they'll stay under here until it's nice enough to start hardening them off outside. These are some of my daylily seedlings. Some are upstairs in a south window because I had to move out the biggest ones. They're going to have to fend for themselves by a south window without sun shining, apparently. Okay, I did have, because I had a lot of power strips and too many things plugged into one thing. Not a good idea, but I did when we had an electrician out here a few years ago doing some other work. I said, what would it take? And he says, oh, not much. And he dropped a couple outlets down here for me, each one holding 4. And they are on a timer. So once I plug the light in, I don't have to worry about turning it on or off. The timer takes care of it. They're on 16 hours a day to give them plenty of light. I also like to run a fan on my seedlings. Toughens them up a little bit, starts to get them ready for the real world when they do go outside and we have 30, 40 mile an hour winds. This is nowhere near that, but I will eventually turn this up to a level 2. Right now it's just on 1 for these younger seedlings. The daylilies are tough enough, they'll handle whatever. So, but I run this about 7 to 8 hours a day. This particular one has its own timer on it, but you could also plug that into a timer if you want, and just so you don't have to worry about remembering to turn it on, turn it off. And one thing you do need to remember, that when you're running a fan, things will dry out a little bit faster, but it helps not only toughen them up, but keeps that air circulation, helps to keep the top dry a little bit so you don't have as much issue with fungus gnats, those little things that look like fruit flies that are really annoying. So those are a few of the reasons I like to run a fan on my seedlings. Just to notice, I believe, this one, and some of these germinated later, which also accounts for the smaller size, but this one is a fluorescent yet, and I need to raise this one up before I burn my parsley. And these are the LEDs, and part of it, like I said, is age, but I did have some others under there earlier that I moved out and moved over here, and since I put them under here, they've gotten a sturdier stem, stockier. So I do think the LEDs are probably worth it if you're starting out that way. You might want to invest in an LED or 2. As I said, some of my daylilies, when I need the space under the lights, for my other plants that I'm growing. Then the daylilies have to come upstairs, and they're not, maybe not super happy about it, but they do survive in front of this south patio door. The downside is it's kind of difficult to use the door when it's got plants in front of it, but since there's, 3 or 4 feet of snow there, it's really not a problem right now. As you can see, some of them are leaning, so I'll have to it's about time to turn them around. But these were started mainly in January because I like to start them and see what I'm going to get. It's like Christmas each time. And then they've been up here, some of them about 2 weeks now, the first 2 trays probably. Okay, so we're just going to kind of recap what we've talked about. What you need for starting your seeds. You need obviously your seeds. Read the information on the back of the packet. It's valuable information. If by chance somebody gave you some seeds, not in a packet that they saved, you can probably look it up online. So just take some time to do that. So you got your seeds, you got your potting mix or your seed starting mix. Maybe a heat mat if you're lucky. If not, maybe a warm spot to start them. A nice humidity dome or a bag and some chopsticks or dowels. Okay, you've read how deep to plant them. You've got everything prepared. All you got to do is take the plunge and do it. It's not as scary as it sounds. And you're going to have some failures. Everybody does. Maybe it's the seed. Maybe something else went wrong. Don't just give up because you have some stuff that doesn't germinate. When I do my daylilies, I figure if I get about 85% germination, I'm doing pretty well. Occasionally, some years it's better, and that might depend on the growing season and how mature the seeds were, because I tend to like the later blooming ones. So sometimes I'm really pushing the envelope, trying to collect seeds from some of them, going, no, don't freeze yet, don't freeze yet, don't freeze yet, or I'm going out there and covering the scape or that plant. So, a lot of things can determine it. And as far as saving your seed from year to year, I do. Most seeds are going to be good, even just stored normally, for at least 3 years. And if you store them cool and dry, maybe in your refrigerator with a packet of silica gel, like comes in with shoes and things. Otherwise, just the coolest area you have, and they're still going to last probably at least 3 years. The viability might drop a little bit each year. And that's why I sometimes will put in 2 seeds if I'm using older seed. But you get 25 or 30 seeds of tomatoes or whatever in a packet. You want maybe 5 or 10 of them, and so you hate to throw that seed away. At least I do. So I keep them and use them. The only thing I buy new seed for every year is parsley, and if I want to plant parsnips, I buy new seed because those already have a lower germination rate. So I don't want to mess with going even lower. As long as you store them cool and dry, they're going to keep well. I mean, they've found seeds stored in old caves and places that were thousands of years old, and they planted them and they germinated. So, don't count them out. You never know. And weed seeds are highly adapted. We know that they can exist for 20 years, some of them, in the soil bank, in a seed bank in the soil. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this segment on seed starting. You're not too late. There's still plenty of things you can start. Some of them, like your begonias and things, you would have had to start much earlier. But again, don't be afraid to give it a try. If you don't have all the equipment, use what you've got. Do your best. Find a warm spot and go for it. Happy gardening. See you next time in the garden.